Another model of doing business is what I call the Yiwu model. Yiwu is a city up towards Shanghai, and it was originally famous for Christmas gifts. Something like 90% of all the Christmas decorations and lights were made there. Now it's basically commodities. You can get just about anything. It's like a giant flea market that's somewhere between factory outlet and wholesale. And what a lot of small buyers do, mostly from places where these products would have a high import duty if they were sent to Africa or the Middle East. So the buyers from those areas will get on a plane, go to Yiwu, and actually buy product cash and carry style. So if you're a small buyer and you've realized that the product is available in China, but maybe you can't get a factory direct relationship, you can find these wholesale markets at Yiwu. The electronics wholesale market is Huaqiangbei in Shenzhen, and you can go in there. The good news is you're going to see everything. The bad news is quality control needs to take place right there on the spot with your own eyes, because once you buy it and walk out the door, there's no warranty, there's no returning it. So the good news is you can find everything. The bad news is you have to know what you're doing when it comes to quality control. We'll talk about that a little bit later in today's presentation. I was also asked today to talk about middlemen, trading companies, intermediaries, import-export companies, consultants. They go by many different names. I just define them as good middlemen and bad middlemen. Let me give you my definition. So in my mind, the middleman that I'm trying to avoid is the broker who doesn't really provide any ongoing value. They just imply that it's so hard to find a factory that you should give order and they'll do the hard work to find the factory. In reality, it's pretty easy to find the factory if you follow my steps. The hard part is managing that factory. So you want to avoid the brokers that just put you in touch with the supplier, then lock in their margin for as long as you do business with that. And there are a lot of them out there. The good middlemen, whether they're an agent, a consultant, whatever, they're fixing these problems. They're leveraging their orders to help you get a better price that you couldn't on your own. They're providing some type of quality control. Maybe the factory has a typical 5% defect rate, but the middleman will put a warranty on it or inspect it himself and get the defect down even smaller. A plan for intellectual property protection, so important. You wouldn't believe it, but often in China, even large factories do not have a formalized system for keeping the customer updated. I've dealt with giant factories that have 5,000 employees, and they didn't have a team for doing account management. You know, in America, you place an order, the factory representative contacts you once a week. Here's the outline, here's the Gantt chart, here's what's happened, here's where we are in our process. You can expect the delivery on time. In China, if you don't ask, they won't tell you what's going on. So the project management is the responsibility of the buy side. So these agents, or these middlemen, whatever you want to call them, one key value that they provide is the project management. So if you're dealing with a trading company or broker, ask them, what are you going to do for me after the order's placed? And this ties in with communications. Simply having someone that you can communicate in your native language, yet they can communicate with the local suppliers in the suppliers' languages, that can be very, very effective. So I'm not here to say middlemen are terrible. I'm here to say be careful about which type you use, because some are terrible and some are great. If you want more information, down at the chinasourcinginfo.org, I wrote a couple white papers on what sourcing agents don't want you to know and tips for engaging service providers. Let me give you two industry tricks that I've witnessed in China. First is the bait and switch. You think you've found a great supplier. Beautiful factory, ISO billboard, staff all in uniforms, even the food tastes good in the cafeteria. You go home thinking, wow, we got the great supplier, great price. And then you leave, what does the factory do? That was the showcase factory. They take the order and give it to another supplier out the back door with broken windows, no overtime paid, almost like a sweatshop almost. And then they keep the margin in their pocket. So be careful of the bait and switch. What I do in my contracts is I state, okay, we will audit this factory at this GPS coordinate sometimes, and we will come back during production, and we want to see the production take place here. I will go one step further and say to my supplier, hey, I know outsourcing happens at every level. You know, if you make this pen, you probably don't make the metal or the ink or the pellets that are compressed into the plastic. Something is outsourced. I get it. let's just be open about what is manufactured under your roof and what is outsourced so that I can manage the quality. So beware of the bait and switch. Next is hidden commissions. If you deal with an agent that says, I'm going to represent you, the buyer, you can trust me, I'll help find you the right supplier, but they don't charge you anything to go out and do that work, what it might mean is that they're also getting a commission from the supplier and they're steering you towards a certain supplier where they know that they're going to make money, which may not be the best price, quality, and lead time for your specific product. I'd like to stop a second and say I'm not here to badmouth or put down the Chinese suppliers. Some of my suppliers are like family. We go on holiday together. Our children are pen pals. I've had overall a wonderful experience dealing with Chinese suppliers. But because the volume of business going to China is so large, there are plenty of unscrupulous characters that would love to take your money and not provide any real value. So as buyers, we kind of need to assume the worst. But please, I really mean to point out that most suppliers in China are pleasant to deal with. But I want to give you the facts so that you're an educated buyer. Okay, let's talk about the types of factories. Now we're moving away from wholesale level and say you have an order that's large enough to go factory direct. What types of factories do you want to look for? Well, these aren't scientific terms. It's just ways that we came up around the office to classify our suppliers. The first one is Chinese factory. Now, a Chinese factory means mainland Chinese owned in the mainland without any direct foreign involvement, which is different from an FIE Chinese factory, which looks Chinese to the uneducated eye, but actually it's a foreign invested enterprise, meaning maybe Canadian Chinese or a lot of Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwanese invest into the mainland. So it might look like a Chinese factory, but those foreign invested enterprises generally have more experience with quality systems, dealing with the customer. Manufacturing basically moved Japan, Korea, Taiwan, then mainland China. So a Taiwanese factory that's invested in China, I like dealing with them because it's in the middle. They have a China price, but also have an understanding of the foreign market. So if this is just a rule of thumb, but generally the Chinese factories might have a lower price, and your FIE gets a little more expensive, and WOFE and joint venture are a little bit more expensive. So the WOFE is the wholly owned foreign enterprise. Sometimes it's spelled WFOE or WOFE, but WOFE is how it's pronounced either way, wholly owned foreign enterprise. And this is where that factory in Cleveland that used to make electronics in the USA, the owner remains the same, and maybe the management is in place, but the factory, and they move it to Dongguan, China. That's a WOFE. It's foreign owned. I like dealing with these types of factories because they really understand quality systems, they understand operational management, project management. The downside is because they come from your home market, they have a better understanding of what is the going price back home. So generally you get what you pay for. The next two wild cards are joint ventures and state-owned enterprise. Technically, there are only two types of joint ventures in China. The first is a contractual joint venture, which is two companies agree to work together under a contract for a fixed period of time. The next is an equity joint venture, where two companies come together. They either start a new company or they share equity. It's a partnership for life. Because often the suppliers know that a foreign buyer will gravitate towards a Chinese factory that has some type of foreign influence, maybe foreign management, a foreign joint venture partner. It gives the perception that they're going to have a better quality system, better market understanding. So the third type of joint venture that I come in across is what I call a fabricated or a fake joint venture, where the supplier, maybe they don't realize that joint venture is a technical term. Maybe in their mind joint venture might just mean working with clients that are overseas. It's a joint venture on production. Sometimes that gets stretched to saying we're a joint venture factory. I'll give you an example. We were working on a project where the supplier told me that they had a joint venture with a Swiss technical firm, and that Swiss firm came to China and helped them manage production. When I dug around and did some due diligence, I found that they had a Swiss customer that came in every other year and made some suggestions about his production. That's a lot different than having a joint venture partner. So if you find out, if your suppliers are telling you, do business with us because we're international or we have some sophisticated technology or partnership, do your due diligence and make sure that it's accurate. I'll talk about how to do the due diligence later.